This is the story of a woman who bought a barn for 50 cents. You heard me right, 50 cents. Her name was Maya Rodriguez, and she thought she was just buying a forgotten pile of wood on a piece of cursed Arizona desert. But what she found inside wasn't just old hay and rusty tools. It was a secret, 150 years old, buried in the dark and soaked in blood and tears. A secret that was never supposed to be found. And the people who buried it, their descendants were still watching, still guarding it, and they were willing to do anything to keep it hidden. What happens next is a story so full of twists, it'll leave you breathless. A story of love, betrayal, and a truth so shocking it was almost lost to time forever. If you believe that some things are worth fighting for, hit that subscribe button right now, because you're about to find out what happens when one woman, with a 50-cent deed in her hand, decides to uncover a past that some people would kill to keep buried. The desert wind was a liar. It whispered sweet nothings about freedom and wide open spaces, but all it really carried was dust and the ghosts of forgotten promises. Maya Rodriguez felt it whip her hair across her face as she stepped out of her beat-up pickup truck. The Arizona sun was a hammer, beating down on the cracked earth. 30 years old, and Maya had become an expert in the language of abandoned things. She was an architectural historian, but that was just a fancy way of saying she listened to the stories old buildings told. And this barn was screaming. 50 cents, she whispered, the crumpled deed feeling like a winning lottery ticket in her hand. The auction had been a circus. City slickers in shiny SUVs, looking for a rustic weekend getaway, had laughed when the lot came up. Local ranchers, their faces weathered like old leather, just shook their heads. They called it the poison patch. Cursed land. But Maya saw something else. It was a gift from her grandmother, a strange kind of sight that let her see the bones of a place, the strength hidden under the decay. The barn stood against the sky like a wounded giant. Its wood was the color of bone, its paint peeling off in strips that fluttered in the breeze like prayers for the dead. It leaned, just a little, as if bowing to the sun that had tried to burn it to the ground for over a century. Maya walked toward the massive double doors. The iron hinges were tumors of orange rust. But the padlock, the one that should have been there for decades, was gone. In its place was a fresh, brutal scar in the wood where it had been pried off. And on the ground, in the dust, were boot prints. Fresh ones. She froze, her hand instinctively dropping to the handle of the small pistol she always carried in her boot. This was a lonely country for a woman alone. The prints were deep, made by a heavy man. But there was something else, something strange she couldn't quite place. A second set of tracks, fainter, irregular. She put her shoulder to the heavy door and pushed. It groaned, the sound of a dying beast. Golden shafts of sunlight cut through the darkness inside, illuminating a million tiny dust motes dancing in the dead, stale air. The place was a tomb. Brittle hay bales were stacked like coffins along one wall. Old farming equipment, shrouded in canvas tarps, looked like mourners in the gloom. But it was the smell that hit her. Sage, cedar, and something else. Something ancient and sacred. This wasn't just a barn. Her boots echoed on the floorboards as she walked deeper inside. She ran her fingers along a massive support beam, feeling the marks of the tools that had shaped it. And there, almost lost in the shadows, were carved symbols. Geometric patterns. A language she didn't know. That's when she heard it. A scraping sound. A muffled thud. It wasn't coming from the loft above her head. It was coming from underneath the floor. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She drew the pistol from her boot, the cold steel a small comfort in the vast echoing silence. This wasn't just a trespasser. This was something else entirely. "I know you're there," she called out, her voice surprisingly steady. "This is private property now. Come out, slowly." The silence that answered was absolute. It was heavy, watchful. Maya took a step back, scanning the floorboards, looking for any sign of a trap door, a cellar entrance. Nothing. Just solid, dusty planks. Had she imagined it? Was the heat getting to her? Then she saw it. A single floorboard near the back wall that wasn't quite flush with the others. The wood around its edges was splintered, newer than the rest. Someone had been prying it up. Recently. She moved toward it, her pistol held tight in both hands. She knelt down, the dust puffing up around her knees. Using the barrel of her gun, she nudged the edge of the board. It lifted easily. A square of perfect, black emptiness opened up beneath her. The air that rose from it was cool and smelled of damp earth and secrets. And then, a hand shot out of the darkness. It wasn't slow, it wasn't menacing. It was lightning fast. It grabbed the edge of the floorboard, and with a grunt of effort, a man pulled himself up out of the hole. He wasn't what she expected. He wasn't a terrifying giant. He was wiry, covered in dirt and sweat, his face etched with exhaustion. His clothes were torn and his eyes were wild like a cornered animal. He looked like he'd been hiding down there for days. He saw the gun in her hand and froze, his hands held up in a gesture of surrender. But he didn't look scared of the gun. He looked scared of her. "You have to leave," he hissed, his voice a dry rasp. "Now, get out of here." "I'm the new owner," Maya said, her gun still steady. "You're the one who needs to leave." "You don't understand," the man said, scrambling the rest of the way out of the hole. He was tall but lean, with long black hair tied back in a messy knot. His face was all sharp angles, and despite the grime, there was a fierce intelligence in his eyes. "You showing up here right now, you've ruined everything." "Ruined what?" Maya stared at him, then at the hole in the floor. Was he a squatter? A fugitive hiding from the law? "I'm warning you," he said, taking a step toward her. "This place isn't for you. It's dangerous. Just get in your truck and drive away. Forget you ever saw it." There was a desperation in his voice that was more convincing than any threat. He wasn't trying to scare her. He was genuinely afraid for her. But why? What was he doing under her barn? "Not until you tell me who you are," Maya said, holding her ground. He let out a frustrated sigh, running a hand through his dirty hair. "My name is Ashki, and I'm here for the same reason you are." Maya frowned. "I'm here because I bought the property." A bitter, humorless laugh escaped his lips. "No, you're not. Nobody buys this land by accident. You're here for the gold." "Gold?" Maya's mind reeled. She thought of the whispers at the auction. Cursed land. She thought of the hostile stares from the local ranchers. "What gold?" she asked, her curiosity starting to outweigh her fear. Ashki pointed a shaky finger at the symbols carved into the support beam. "That. It's not just decoration. It's a map. The old stories are true. They say an Apache warrior and his Mexican bride hid a fortune here, back in the 1800s. Gold from her father's mines? They say they used it to build a hidden sanctuary right under this barn." He looked at her with an appraising glint in his eye, his fear momentarily replaced by suspicion. "So who are you? A historian? A treasure hunter? How did you find out about it?" This was insane. A hidden treasure map? A secret sanctuary? It sounded like something out of a movie, but the intensity in his eyes, the raw desperation. He believed it, every word. And the craziest part? A small part of her believed it too. It explained the sacred smell. It explained the strange energy of the place. Maybe her grandmother's gift wasn't just about seeing potential in old wood. "I'm an architectural historian," she said slowly, lowering her gun just a fraction. "I didn't know anything about any gold. I felt drawn to this place." Ashki stared at her, searching her face for a lie. He seemed to find none. His shoulders slumped. "Then you just stumbled into the middle of a very old, very dangerous story. And you need to walk away before it's too late." Before she could ask what he meant, another sound cut through the silence. The low rumble of an engine. Ashki's head snapped toward the barn doors. Pure terror flashed across his face. "He's here. He found me." "Who?" Maya whispered, raising her pistol again. "Morrison," Ashki breathed, his eyes darting around the barn for an escape. "His family has been trying to find the gold for generations. They think this land is theirs, and they'll kill anyone who gets in their way." The rumble grew louder. A big pickup truck, the kind that cost more than a small house, was barreling down the dirt road, kicking up a storm of dust. "Down!" Ashki commanded, shoving her toward the hole in the floor. Get down there, now! If he finds you here... He didn't need to finish. Maya scrambled toward the opening, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She had thought she was buying an old barn, a piece of history. Instead, she had bought a treasure map, a deadly rivalry, and a secret that people were apparently willing to kill for. As she lowered herself into the cool, earthy darkness, she heard the truck skid to a stop outside. A heavy door slammed, and a voice thick with menace and authority boomed across the yard. Ashki, I know you're in there. I've been patient, but my patience just ran out. This land is mine, and so is everything under it. The darkness below the barn was absolute. It was a cold, suffocating blackness that smelled of damp earth and time itself. Maya landed softly on the dirt floor, her breath held tight in her chest. Above her, she heard Ashki pulling the floorboard back into place, plunging them into near-total blackness. A sliver of light from the cracks was the only thing that kept it from being a tomb. She heard footsteps on the floor above. Heavy, confident, the man named Morrison. Don't make this harder than it needs to be, Ashki, the voice boomed. It was a voice used to giving orders and being obeyed. My great-grandfather should have finished your family off 150 years ago. I'm here to correct his mistake. A cold dread washed over Maya. This wasn't just a property dispute. This was a blood feud. He can't find us down here, Ashki whispered, his voice so close it made her jump. He had an old-fashioned oil lantern, and with a flick of a match, a warm, flickering light pushed back the darkness. They were in a narrow, hand-dug tunnel. The walls were packed earth, held in place by rotting timbers. It was a makeshift, desperate place, not a grand sanctuary. He's wrong, you know, Ashki said, his face grim in the lamplight. About the gold. What do you mean? Maya whispered back. The story. I told you what the Morrisons believe, what everyone believes. It's the story my family has been telling for generations, a lie to protect the real secret. A lie? Another layer, another twist. Then what's the truth? There was no gold, Ashki said, his eyes burning with a fierce intensity. My ancestor, Nal Nish, he wasn't guarding a treasure. He was guarding a person, Isabella, his wife, your ancestor. Maya's mind went blank. My ancestor? That's impossible. Your name is Rodriguez. You have Spanish blood, but you have the high cheekbones of the people. The Tohono O'odham, maybe? Maya was stunned into silence. Her great-grandmother was Tohono O'odham. How could he possibly know that? Our families, they were never meant to mix, Ashki continued, his voice dropping to a low, reverent tone. Nal Nish was Apache. Isabella Morales was the daughter of a wealthy Mexican landowner. Their love was forbidden, a crime. When her family found out, they tried to kill him. When his people found out, they wanted to cast her out. So they ran. He gestured around the crude tunnel. They built this place, not with gold, but with their bare hands. A place where they could be together. This wasn't a treasure vault. It was a home. The floorboards above them creaked. Morrison was searching. He's looking in the wrong place, Ashki whispered. This tunnel is just a decoy. The real sanctuary, I haven't found it yet. My grandfather told me the entrance was hidden somewhere in the barn, but I've been searching for months. Suddenly, something clicked in Maya's mind. The symbols, the ones carved into the support beam. Ashki thought they were part of the decoy story, a fake map, but Maya was a historian. She recognized the style. They weren't Apache. They were a mix of Spanish colonial and O'odham design. It wasn't Nalnish's story. It was Isabella's. The symbols, Maya breathed. They aren't a map to gold. They're a story, a history, maybe a clue. Ashki looked at her, skepticism warring with a flicker of hope in his eyes. My family has looked at those carvings for a century. They don't mean anything. They mean something to me, Maya insisted. My grandmother taught me how to read these kinds of pictographs. It's a mix of styles, a blend of two cultures, just like them. Above them, there was a frustrated roar, a loud crash, as if something heavy had been thrown against the wall. "I'll be back, Ashki," Morrison bellowed. "I'll tear this barn down board by board if I have to. You can't hide forever." The sound of the truck engine started up again, and then the rumble faded into the distance. Silence. Ashki let out a long, shuddering breath. He looked at Maya, his eyes full of a new, desperate hope. "Can you really read them?" "I can try," Maya said. They climbed back out of the tunnel into the dusty, sunlit barn. The place felt different now, sacred. Maya ran her hand over the carved symbols. It was like reading a forgotten language. She saw a woman, Isabella. She saw a warrior, Nalnish. She saw them building a life together in secret. But then the images grew darker. Men with rifles, fire, weeping families. And then she saw it, the final symbol. It wasn't a complex image. It was simple, stark, and it made her blood run cold. It was a well. And hanging over the well was a single, silver locket. "There's a well on this property," Maya whispered, her heart pounding. "It's on the old survey maps. It's supposed to be dried up." Ashki's eyes widened. "The well, my grandfather used to talk about it. He said it was a place of spirits, a place to be avoided." Another lie, another story to protect the truth. "It's not a decoy," Maya said, a thrill of discovery shooting through her. "The sanctuary, it's in the well." They found it at the far edge of the property, half hidden by overgrown mesquite trees. It was just a ring of crumbling stones, a dark circle in the earth. It looked like it hadn't seen water in 100 years. There was a heavy wooden lid, warped and gray with age. It took both of them, straining to heave it aside. The air that rose up was cool and musty. Maya peered over the edge. The shaft was about 30 feet deep, and at the bottom, there was nothing but shadows and dirt. "There's nothing here," Ashki said, his voice flat with disappointment. "Wait," Maya said. She remembered the pictograph. The well itself wasn't the secret. The secret was in the well. She remembered Isabella's mixed heritage. She thought like an architect, a builder. "Look at the stones," she said, pointing to the inside wall of the well shaft. "They're not all the same. See that one? The color is slightly different." Ashki squinted. He saw it too. A single dark gray stone among the lighter brown ones, about 10 feet down. There was an old rotten rope tied to a nearby tree. It wouldn't hold their weight. "I'll go," Ashki said, his voice firm. He was a skilled climber. She could see it in his movements. He began to brace himself, preparing to rappel down the crumbling wall. "No," Maya said. "Let me." She pointed to the stone. "It's not about strength. It's a puzzle. It's Isabella's design." Before he could argue, she took a deep breath and started climbing down, finding handholds and footholds in the crumbling mortar. The stones were slick with a fine layer of grime. Her fingers ached. She reached the gray stone. It looked solid, just like the others. She pushed on it. Nothing. She pulled. Nothing. She thought about the symbols again, the story they told, a story of two cultures blending, creating something new. It wasn't a simple push-pull mechanism. It had to be something more. Her fingers traced the edges of the stone, feeling for a seam, a latch. She felt a small, almost imperceptible groove along the bottom edge. She slid her fingers into it and pushed up. There was a soft click, the sound of a well-oiled mechanism, impossibly preserved after all this time. The stone didn't move, but a section of the well wall beside it swung inward, revealing a dark, rectangular opening, a passage. The air that flowed out smelled of cedar and sage and a love that had refused to die. "You found it," Ashki breathed from above, his voice filled with awe. "You found it." Maya pulled herself into the opening, her heart singing with triumph. This was it, the real sanctuary. Ashki followed her down, and using the light from his lantern, they moved through the short passage. It opened into a circular chamber that stole Maya's breath. It was not a tomb. It was a home. The domed ceiling was high above them. The walls were covered in vibrant paintings telling the story of Isabella and Nalnish in vivid color. Blankets and pottery were stacked neatly on stone shelves. A sleeping area, lined with furs, was carved into one wall. It was perfectly preserved, a bubble of time sealed away from the world. And in the center of the room, on a small stone pedestal, was a small, intricately carved wooden box. Maya approached it as if in a trance. Her hands trembled as she reached out and lifted the lid. Inside, resting on a bed of faded velvet, was a silver locket. It was exactly like the one in the pictograph. She picked it up. It was heavy and warm to the touch, as if it still held the heat of the woman who had worn it. She opened it. Inside were two miniature hand-painted portraits. On one side was a beautiful young woman with dark, defiant eyes and features so similar to Maya's, it was like looking at a reflection across time. Isabella. But it was the other portrait that made her gasp. It wasn't a handsome Apache warrior. It was a white man, a soldier in a crisp blue uniform, with cold, calculating eyes and a cruel twist to his lips. And beneath the portrait, a name was engraved in tiny, elegant script. Lieutenant James Morrison. The locket felt like a block of ice in Maya's hand. This changed everything. The story Ashke's family had passed down for generations. It wasn't just a lie to protect a secret. It was fundamentally wrong. Isabella wasn't in love with Nalnish. She was involved with the ancestor of the very man who was trying to hunt them down. This can't be right, Ashke stammered, staring at the portrait. His face was a mask of confusion and betrayal. His entire history, the foundation of his family's duty, had just crumbled into dust. Nalnish. He was her husband, my great-great-grandfather. Then who was this? Maya whispered, holding up the locket. The story had a hole in it, a massive, gaping wound. If Isabella loved Morrison, then why was she hiding with Nalnish? Who was the enemy? Her family? His? It made no sense. Unless Nalnish wasn't her lover, unless he was her bodyguard. Maybe the story's true, Maya said, thinking aloud, her historian's mind racing to piece together the fragments. But we've been reading it wrong. Maybe Isabella's family hired Nalnish to protect her, to hide her from Morrison. It was a possibility. It would explain why Nalnish was there, why he built this sanctuary. He wasn't a lover. He was a guardian, a protector. But it still felt wrong. The paintings on the walls didn't depict a bodyguard in his charge. They depicted a family, a man, a woman, and two small children, their hands intertwined. The intimacy was undeniable. It was love. There's something else, Ashke said, his voice low. He pointed to the small wooden box where the locket had been. Look. Maya looked closer. There was a false bottom in the box. She pried it up with her fingernail. Underneath lay a small leather-bound journal. The leather was stiff and cracked with age. The pages were filled with elegant, looping handwriting. Spanish. Isabella's journal. Can you read it? Ashke asked, his voice tight with anticipation. Yes, Maya breathed, opening it to the first page. The words that leaped out at her were not the words of a woman in love with a soldier. They were words of terror. He will not stop, the first entry read. Lieutenant Morrison is a monster. He is obsessed. My father thinks the match is a good one, a way to secure his landholdings with the power of the American army. He does not see the darkness in the lieutenant's eyes. He does not see the way he looks at me, as if I am a thing to be owned. Maya's hands shook as she read on. The journal told a harrowing story. James Morrison had become infatuated with Isabella. When she rejected him, he became violent, threatening her and her family. He was a powerful man, an officer in the territorial army. No one would stand against him. No one except Nalnish. He had been a tracker, hired by Isabella's father to hunt a mountain lion that had been killing their livestock. He saw Morrison's cruelty, and he saw the fear in Isabella's eyes. And he stayed, not as a hired guard, but as something more. They fell in love, quickly, desperately, in the shadow of Morrison's growing obsession. Nalnish is my only hope, Isabella wrote. We are building a place, a sanctuary where we can be free, a place where my children can be born safe from the monster who hunts me. Her children. The paintings on the wall suddenly made a terrible kind of sense. The locket wasn't a symbol of love for Morrison. It was a warning. It was the face of their enemy. They were together, Maya whispered to Ashke, her voice thick with emotion. You were right. They were in love. They had a family. A wave of relief washed over Ashke's face. But it was quickly replaced by grim understanding. So Morrison, he wasn't just a rival. He was a predator. Maya flipped to the last entry in the journal. The handwriting was rushed, panicked. Blotches of ink stained the page like tears. He has found us. Someone betrayed our secret. Nalnish has gone to face him, to lead him away from here. He made me promise to seal the entrance and not open it for anyone but him. He told me to protect the children, no matter the cost. His brother is waiting for us at the place of the whispering winds. If I am not there by sunrise, he is to take the children and run. My love, my warrior, may the spirits guide you back to me. The entry was dated October 12th, 1851. It was the last one. A profound, heartbreaking silence filled the chamber. Nalnish had never returned. He had sacrificed himself to save his family. So what happened? Ashki said, his voice raw. What happened to Isabella and the children? The journal didn't say. The story ended on that cliffhanger, 174 years ago. But as Maya closed the journal, her fingers brushed against the inside of the back cover. She felt a bump, a thickness that shouldn't have been there, a hidden pocket. Carefully, she worked her fingernail under the leather. It came loose, revealing a smaller, folded piece of paper tucked inside. It was brittle, and it threatened to crumble in her fingers. She unfolded it. It was a letter. But the handwriting wasn't Isabella's. It was a man's. It was in English. And as Maya read the first line, a gasp escaped her lips. The final, most shocking piece of the puzzle fell into place. The truth was darker than either of them could have ever imagined. The letter began with two words that changed everything. My dearest Isabella. It wasn't from Nalnish. It wasn't from Morrison. The handwriting was unfamiliar. Maya read aloud, her voice trembling in the lantern light. I pray this letter finds you, though I know you will never read it. I write this with a heavy heart, to confess my sins to the ghost of the woman I failed to protect. My name is Corporal Thomas Miller. I served under Lieutenant Morrison. Ashki took a step closer, his face a granite mask of tension. The lieutenant was a madman, Maya continued reading, consumed by you. When he learned of your love for the Apache, he lost what was left of his reason. He ordered us to ride out, not on official business, but on a personal vendetta. He found Nalnish in the canyon. It was not a fair fight. It was an execution. I saw it with my own eyes. A choked sound came from Ashki's throat. The oral history of his family was that Nalnish had died a warrior's death. The truth was so much uglier. But that was not the end of his evil, the letter went on. He came back to the barn, to this land. He was sure your sanctuary was here, and he was convinced you had hidden your father's gold within it. He couldn't find the entrance. He tortured one of your servants, a young girl, until she told him about the well. We went to the well. He found the entrance. He went inside. Maya's blood ran cold. The journal entry, Isabella had been waiting for Nalnish. She wouldn't have opened the door for anyone else, which meant Morrison had found another way in. Or, he didn't find the entrance, Ashki said, his voice a low growl. We did. It was sealed from the inside. This place has been untouched. Keep reading, he urged. He was gone for an hour. When he came out, there was blood on his uniform. He told us he had found nothing. No gold, no sanctuary. He ordered us to seal the well, to bury it and never speak of it again. He said the land was cursed and that he would buy it himself to ensure no one ever disturbed it again. The pieces were slotting into place, forming a picture of pure evil. Morrison hadn't found the sanctuary. He had lied to his men. But why? The next line of the letter explained everything. But I knew he was lying. As we filled the well, I heard something, a sound from deep within the earth. It was faint but unmistakable. It was the sound of a baby crying. Maya had to stop, her hand flying to her mouth. The children. Isabella's children had been in the sanctuary. Morrison had sealed them in. He had buried them alive. Ashki let out a roar of pure anguish, his fist smashing against the stone wall. The sound echoed the pain of his ancestors. This wasn't just murder, it was an atrocity. But the corporal's letter wasn't finished. There was one final devastating twist. I live with that sound every day of my life, Maya read, her voice cracking. But there is one more thing you must know. One more sin I must confess. Before he went into the well, Lieutenant Morrison gave me an order. He gave me this letter, which he had written to you, in a silver locket. He ordered me to leave them in the barn, on the support beam where you and Nalnish had carved your initials. He said, if anyone ever comes looking, this will be the story they find. The story of my love for her. Maya looked up at Ashki, her eyes wide with horrified understanding. The locket with Morrison's picture in it, the one they had found in the box. It wasn't Isabella's. It was a plant. A piece of false evidence left by a murderer to rewrite history, to poison the truth of the love he had destroyed. James Morrison hadn't just killed Nalnish and Isabella. He had tried to erase them. He had created a false narrative, a lie that would be passed down for generations, smearing Isabella's name and hiding his own monstrous crimes. And Corporal Miller? He couldn't go through with it. He couldn't stomach planting the fake letter and locket. So he had hidden them, along with his own confession, inside Isabella's journal, hoping that one day somehow the truth would be found. The real locket, the one Isabella had actually worn, the one with her and Nalnish's portraits, it was still out there. It was the one from the pictograph. He didn't just murder them, Ashki snarled, his voice vibrating with a century and a half of rage. He tried to steal their story. It was the ultimate act of a psychopath, to not only destroy his victims, but to desecrate their memory. The sound of a vehicle approaching pulled them from their horrified trance. It was Morrison. He was back. He knows, Maya said, a new cold fear gripping her. Somehow he knows we found this place. And he's not coming to talk, Ashki said, his eyes going dark. He's coming to finish what his great-great-grandfather started. They were trapped, 30 feet underground, in the tomb of their ancestors, with a murderer's descendant coming to seal their fate. There's no other way out, Ashki said, looking at the narrow passage leading back to the well. We're cornered. Maya's mind was racing. Morrison was coming to kill them and seal the sanctuary forever, bearing the truth along with their bodies. They had to get out. But how? Her eyes scanned the chamber, desperately looking for another exit, another passage. There was nothing. Just solid stone walls covered in the vibrant paintings of a life cut short. Her gaze fell on the sleeping alcove, the one lined with furs. It was the largest carving in the room. Why make it so deep? Ashki, she said, her voice urgent, help me. They pulled the old, brittle furs away from the back of the alcove. Behind them was a wall of smooth carved stone. It looked seamless. But Maya, the historian, the woman who understood how old things were put together, saw what others would have missed. A faint, almost invisible outline of a large rectangular block. It was another door. They pushed. Nothing. It was sealed tight. It's no use, Ashki said, as the sound of Morrison's truck grew louder, closer. They could hear him shouting outside. Wait, Maya said, her mind flashing back to the journal, to Isabella's last words. He made me promise to seal the entrance and not open it for anyone but him. It wasn't a dead end. It was a door designed to be opened only from the inside. There had to be a mechanism. She ran her hands frantically over the stone, feeling for a latch, a seam, a keyhole. Nothing. Isabella was a builder, a creator. Her designs were clever, blending two cultures, the pictographs, the well entrance. This would be too. It wouldn't be simple. Her eyes fell back to the paintings on the walls, the story of their lives. There was one panel, right next to the alcove, that she hadn't paid much attention to before. It showed Nalnish and Isabella standing beside a massive cedar tree, their hands pressed against its trunk. The stars above them were arranged in a strange pattern. The stars. Maya looked up at the domed ceiling of the chamber. It wasn't just a plain dome. It was pocked with small, dark holes, like a miniature planetarium. The lantern, Maya said. Hold it up to the ceiling. Ashki lifted the flickering oil lantern. In the shifting light, Maya could see it. The holes weren't random. They formed constellations, and one of them, directly above the hidden door, matched the star pattern from the painting. Within the constellation, one of the holes was slightly larger than the others. Lift me up, she commanded. Ashki hoisted her onto his shoulders. She could just reach the ceiling. She stuck her fingers into the larger hole. She felt a small stone button. She pushed it. A low grinding sound echoed through the chamber as the stone block in the alcove slid sideways, revealing a dark, narrow tunnel. A back door. An escape route. A path to survival left by a woman who refused to let her family be destroyed. They scrambled into the tunnel just as they heard the first shovelful of dirt hit the wooden lid of the well above. Morrison wasn't just going to seal them in, he was going to bury them. The tunnel was long and sloped upwards. It was pitch black, and they had to leave the lantern behind. They moved by touch, their hands scraping against the rough-hewn rock. After what felt like an eternity, they saw a faint glimmer of light. The tunnel opened up into a small cave, hidden deep within a rocky outcrop hundreds of yards from the barn. They were out. They were free. From their hiding place, they could see the barn, and Jack Morrison, his face contorted with rage, frantically shoveling dirt into the well, assisted by two of his ranch hands. They had Isabella's journal. They had the corporal's confession. They had the truth. But Morrison had a gun and a head start. "We have to call the sheriff," Maya said, reaching for her phone. No signal. "It doesn't matter," Ashke said, his voice cold as steel. "The sheriff is Morrison's cousin. He would never believe us without concrete proof." "The journal is proof." "It's the word of a dead woman against the most powerful man in the county," Ashke countered. "We need more. We need something undeniable." Maya's mind raced. What was left? What proof could they possibly find? The pictograph, the well, and the locket. The real locket. Corporal Miller said he couldn't bring himself to plant Morrison's fake locket on the support beam. He hid it with the journal instead, which means the beam was empty. So where was the real one? Isabella wouldn't have been wearing it when Morrison attacked. It was too precious. A symbol of a love he wanted to destroy. She would have hidden it. Hidden it where? Her eyes went to the barn, standing like a silent witness against the sunset. She thought of Isabella's last moments, her desperate plan. "His brother is waiting for us at the place of the whispering winds. If I am not there by sunrise, he is to take the children and run." She didn't run to the escape tunnel with her children. She sent them there. She stayed behind. To do what? To buy them time, to confront the monster, and to leave one last message, one final piece of the truth. "It's in the barn," Maya whispered. "The locket. It has to be." They waited until darkness fell, until Morrison and his men, satisfied that their secret was buried forever, had finally left. Then, under the cover of a moonless night, they snuck back to the barn. The place felt violated. The floorboards above the decoy tunnel smashed. The support beams splintered where Morrison had vented his rage. Maya went straight to the beam with the pictographs. She ran her hands over the carving of the locket. Nothing. "It's not here," Ashke said, his hope fading. "Think like her," Maya insisted. She knew Morrison would come looking. She knew he would tear this place apart. She wouldn't have hidden it in an obvious place. She would have hidden it in plain sight. Her eyes scanned the massive beam. It was ancient, scarred with the marks of time. And then she saw it. A small wooden knot no bigger than a quarter. But unlike the other knots, this one had a perfect circular seam around it. Her heart leaped into her throat. Using the tip of her knife, she carefully pried at the knot. It popped out like a cork. Inside the small round hole, wrapped in a scrap of oilcloth, was the real locket. It was heavier than the fake one, the silver warm and alive. Maya opened it. There they were, Nal Nish and Isabella. He wasn't smiling, but his eyes, fixed on her, were full of a fierce, protective love. And she was looking back at him, a small, secret smile on her lips. It was a love that defied armies and defied time. And behind Nal Nish's portrait, Maya found one last, tiny folded note. It was from Isabella, her final words. "He killed my love. Now he comes for me. But he will not have my children. They carry our story. Find them. Find the truth. Nalnish. Isabella. We lived. We loved." This was it. The undeniable proof. The murderer's own locket. The confession of his soldier. The journal of his victim. And now the final testament from Isabella herself, hidden with the proof of her true love. They had the whole story, and now they were going to make sure the world heard it. The next morning, they didn't go to the sheriff. They went to the county courthouse to the land records office. They didn't present the journal or the lockets. Not yet. Maya, the architectural historian, knew that sometimes the most powerful truths are hidden in the driest of documents. She asked for the original deed and survey records for the poison patch from 1851. The clerk brought out a massive dusty ledger, and there it was. On October 13, 1851, the day after Isabella's last journal entry, the deed for the land was transferred, sold by Isabella's grieving father to a new owner, Lieutenant James Morrison. And the signature on the bill of sale, the one that witnessed the transaction, was a man named Jack Morrison, the current sheriff's great-great-grandfather. The entire system, the entire power structure of the county, was built on a foundation of murder and corruption, passed down from father to son for 174 years. They had been guarding the secret, not just out of family shame, but because their wealth, their power, their very existence was tied to that first bloody crime. Now Maya and Ashki had them. They made one more stop. They went to the local newspaper. The confrontation didn't happen in a dusty barn. It happened in the harsh, fluorescent light of the sheriff's office. Jack Morrison was there. The sheriff was there. They were laughing about something when Mayor and Ashki walked in. The laughter died on their lips. "You're supposed to be dead," Morrison snarled. "The truth is a hard thing to kill," Maya said, her voice ringing with clarity. She placed Isabella's journal on the sheriff's desk. She placed the two lockets, the real and the fake, side by side. She placed Corporal Miller's confession next to them. And finally, she placed the copy of the 1851 land deed on top of the pile. "My great-great-grandmother, Isabella Morales," Maya said, her voice steady. "His great-great-grandfather, Nal Nish. They were murdered by your great-great-grandfather, James Morrison. And your family sheriff helped him cover it up for 150 years. The sheriff's face went pale. Morrison lunged across the desk, his face a mask of primal fury. But it was too late. The door to the office opened, and a reporter and a photographer from the newspaper walked in. The story exploded. It wasn't just a local scandal. It became national news. A 150-year-old murder mystery, a story of forbidden love, a conspiracy of silence that had shaped a community for generations. The Morrison empire crumbled. Faced with irrefutable proof and public outrage, the family lost everything. Their land, their power, their stolen legacy. Justice, after a century and a half of waiting in the dark, had finally come into the light. The sanctuary was declared a state and national historic site. Archaeologists and historians came from all over the world to study the perfectly preserved home of Nalnish and Isabella. The paintings on the walls telling their true story were now seen by thousands. And the directors of the new Isabella and Nalnish Cultural Center, Maya Rodriguez and Ashki, they stood together in the doorway of the restored barn, watching as a bus full of school children arrived for a tour. Their hands were intertwined. Around Maya's neck, catching the Arizona sun, was Isabella's locket. The 50-cent barn hadn't been a purchase. It had been a summons, a call across time from a love so strong it refused to be erased. The story had been buried, but it had never died. It had lived on in the blood of its descendants, waiting for the right moment, for the right people, brave enough to bring it back into the sun. What an unbelievable story. From a 50-cent barn to uncovering a 150-year-old murder. It just makes you wonder, doesn't it? What would you have done? If you were Maya, would you have run when you first met Ashki? Would you have had the courage to climb down into that dark well, not knowing what you'd find? And what about the big question? When you discovered the truth, would you have confronted the Morrisons? Or would you have decided some secrets are too dangerous to uncover? Tell me your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. These are the stories that remind us that the past is never truly gone, and that love and truth are always worth fighting for. If this story touched your heart, and if you believe that justice, no matter how long it takes, must be served, then you belong here with us. Hit that subscribe button and join our family, because there are countless other hidden stories out there, just waiting for someone to be brave enough to tell them. Let's find them together.